Hi y'all, this is Larry at Deep South Texas, and today we're going to make a loaf of French bread. Now the recipe for this, and I'll leave it in the description below, is the same as my recipe for making baguettes. But instead of making 3 baguettes, I'm going to make 1 loaf of French bread. The family has been asking for French bread for a few days now, and so I decided to make some today and take you along. Now I actually started this last night. For better taste and better texture, you need to make a Poolish or a sponge the night before. It only takes a few minutes to mix it up. Let's take a look at that now. So let's get that Poolish started. The first thing we're going to do is measure out 132 milliliters of water. Now that's 132 grams. So I'm measuring grams. And there's 132. All right. Now, we want that same amount of flour, and I'm using King Arthur bread flour here. So we want 132 grams of flour. Oop. So we put the flour we measured out into a mixing bowl, and then I add a half a teaspoon of yeast. And this is instant yeast. If you're using active dry yeast, follow the directions that come with the yeast. But this is instant yeast. So we have the yeast mixed up with the flour, and now we're going to add the water that we measured out earlier. And this is room temperature water. So instant yeast, this works just fine. Now we just mix that up. So we have that all mixed up, yeast, flour, and water. Now I'm going to cover that with plastic wrap and let that sit out on the counter overnight. And then when we come back to make our bread tomorrow morning, it will be ready. Now this seems like an extra step, but it doesn't take very long, and I do this the night before. It doesn't take very long, but it adds a tremendous amount of flavor to the bread we're going to make tomorrow. So we'll see you in the morning. And here is the Poolish we whipped up last night. It has fermented and bubbled up, and it looks pretty strange here this morning. We're going to take now and add to this Poolish 168 milliliters or grams of water. And this is just room temperature water. Try to mix that up a little bit. And now we want to get the rest of our flour ready. We have 293 grams of flour. And to that, we're going to add a teaspoon and a half of salt and another half a teaspoon of instant yeast. And we'll get that all mixed in. And we'll begin to add that to our Poolish and water mixture. And we'll get that all mixed together. Now we have our dough all roughly mixed together. Now we're going to let it set for 20 minutes to sort of hydrate all that flour that we put in there. So we're going to cover it with plastic wrap and let it set for 20 minutes. Well, I believe that the flour has been hydrated, and now this recipe is for no knead bread, but in place of the kneading, what we're going to do is a series of stretch and folds. And I have a little bit of water here just to wet my fingers so the dough doesn't stick to it. And you just pick up the dough and fold it over several times. And put it back in the bowl. And we'll do that 4 times. So that was the first time. We'll do that 3 more times, and we'll wait 10 to 15 minutes between each stretch and fold. And while we're waiting for the next one, we will cover it again with the plastic wrap. It's time for the next stretch and fold, and each time you do this, the dough feels better and better. And we have 2 more to do. I'll probably bring you back for the final one. So this is the 4th stretch and fold. And you can see the dough is really looking nice and silky at this point. So I've taken this opportunity to wash out my mixing bowl, put the dough back in. Now we will cover it and let the dough rise for 45 minutes to an hour, or until it's doubled in size. Well, we've waited an hour and the dough has more than doubled. So let's spread just a little bit of flour on the breadboard here. And roll this dough out onto the board. There we go. Want to punch it down just a little bit to get some of the bigger bubbles out of it. We don't want to get them all the bubbles out. And we want to stretch it out a little bit fold it over into the middle. And then we want to bend it over, fold it over this way. And roll it out just a little bit. This is just our pre-shaping effort right here. And then we're going to let that rest for 20 minutes. And come back and do the final shaping. Time to do the final shaping. Stretch it out a little bit. And then I'm going to fold it over again like we did before. Punch that in real good. And then roll it out to try to make it a little bit longer. And put it on our tray that we'll be baking it in. Now we'll be covering that with plastic wrap again and letting that raise for about an hour. In a half hour, I'm going to start preheating the oven to 425 degrees. So our bread has been rising for an hour, and it's about time to put it into the oven. The oven has been preheated to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. But first, we want to put some, we want to score the top of it a little bit. And what I'm using here is a razor blade that I'm dipping in water because it makes it a little bit easier. And just slashing the top of it. You can use a sharp knife for this, but finding a sharp knife in my house is a little difficult. So this razor blade works just fine. And then we're going to brush the top with just a little water. What we want to see happen is get some good oven spring when we put this bread into the very hot oven, and want to keep the top from getting hard as long as possible so that it puffs up a little bit. Get some good oven spring. And for that same purpose, I also have a very heavy pan that's been preheated in the oven, and I will pour into that pan a cup of water that will create a bunch of steam. Let's do that now. So we'll leave that in the oven for 30 to 35 minutes. At 30 minutes, I'll be checking to see if it's brown enough to my liking, and that's the way I tell when it's done, when it gets to the color that I'm looking for. But while we're waiting, now, if you enjoy this video and you enjoy this type of content, I'd appreciate it if you'd please subscribe. And if you just hit that little red button down there and subscribe, it would be great. We'll see you when the bread comes out. Well, the bread's been in the oven for about 35 minutes. I think it's ready to come out. Oh, it's looking good. Let's get it on the cooling rack. And there it is. It's looking pretty nice. Sounds hollow, so I think it's done. Now comes the hardest part about baking bread. We need to wait for this bread to cool down before we cut into it. I can hardly wait. Well, it's almost cool. Let's cut into it and see what we got here. Nice and crunchy on the outside. Come on. And it looks like it's got a pretty nice crumb as well. Well, let's put a piece of butter on that and see what it tastes like. Still a little bit warm. That's okay. Let's give it a taste. That is good. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it that thumbs up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.